I want to welcome you this evening to Ghost Ride Tours. I'm Jill, this is Holly, and Ghost Ride Tours are the haunted historical tours of St. Louis. And I want to tell you that, you may not see a ghost, then again, you might have an experience of one of the other senses where the ghost and the spiritual energies are concerned. But most often, the ghosts or any kind of spiritual feeling that you might feel will be where there is has been a lot of emotion, whether it's a negative emotion or a very strong emotion. And that is where the hauntings usually will be felt again. Sometimes people will also say that it's like a recording that takes place and it just plays itself over and over and over.
Sometimes it's a cold spot. There's a cold spot here at the Feasting Fox, and we usually do not mention the cold spot, but we will have our guests say where they're sitting they feel very cold, and we've had people say, it's not cold in here, and will trade me places, and they trade places, and yes, that spot is cold. That's an energy, and it's said that whenever a spirit is trying to manifest, that it will take energy and it will make a cold spot.
The Feasting Fox, it's been open for about the last 10 years, and Marty and Sue Lepker actually refurbished this building. It had been vacant. It had been Al Smith's Feasting Fox for many years, and then it went vacant, and the city was actually going to tear it down. And much to everybody's dismay, because there were so many beautiful landmarks in the city, and this was one of them. It was actually known as a Dutch town landmark because of its steep pitched roof and the Tudor style. And it was just going to go to ruins, and they were going to pull it down. So they went and they got a grant. They were able to get the money to refurbish it, and here it is today. And it was actually August Bush was the one who built the Feasting Fox in 1913. It was just before the Prohibition came. And he actually wanted to offer the city a place where families could go.
When we started researching and doing our Ghost Ride tours, of course we were directed here to the Feasting Fox because one of the gentlemen we had interviewed said that he had been here with his girlfriend, and they'd asked to come up to this room because they had heard in this room there had been apparitions seen. Namely the apparition of Anna Bush, who was Adolphus and Lily's daughter. This was an inn that was built, and it was offered to the public as a Bavarian style experience, so the families could come as a group and enjoy the Bavarian style of hospitality. Well, Anna and the other women of the Bush family were allowed to live on these premises as the Bevo Mill, but the men were required to live at the brewery because they worked at the brewery. So Anna was quite often here by herself. And we were told that across the street there was a large motorcycle round. It was a big wooden round where the boys with their German motorcycles would race. Well, Anna was able to look out her turret window and view these boys racing around and around and around. And it was said that she fell in love with one of the guys. And because she was of her social status, she was not allowed to socially meet this young man, and we heard that she hung herself in the turret room here at the Feasting Fox. When the gentleman who came here and told us what he saw, he said that she was about 50-ish, with salt and pepper hair, had it tightly pulled back on her head, had a high collar and a brooch. And he saw her in the mirror as he started to sit down at the table. He also told us that he and his girlfriend found a pair of leather gloves on one of the seats. And of course there was no reason for leather gloves to be on the seat, but when they picked them up, they had a hot bite feel to them. And later in the evening, the gloves vanished. They were no longer there.
The brewers came here to St. Louis because they wanted to have a place where they could brew all of their beer in the caves underneath the city. And St. Louis is really interesting in that it is one of the few cities in the world that is totally underlying of caves. It was known as the Mound City, In fact, that was how they nicknamed it. And there were actually entrances from the mounds into the caves below.
I saw out of the corner of my eye the gentleman go into the men's room, and I swear I saw somebody go into the ladies' room, because when I went up to the door, I was kidding, and I said, I'm knocking three times, and I opened the door, and there was nobody in there. The light wasn't on, and I thought, oh boy.
Tonight we're going to have a special view of one of St. Louis's most notorious cemeteries, Bellefontaine, but it is one of the nicest, largest cemeteries in the United States. In fact, when the filming crews from Hollywood film, they choose to film there. And we'll see the mausoleum from the Lemps, and we'll see the mausoleum from the Bush family, which are some of the larger mausoleums. We're going to be going to the City Museum tonight. We think it's one of the most haunted buildings in downtown St. Louis, and we have many experienced ghost stories in the City Museum. We're also going to be going to the City Hall, and we've been invited to come into the City Hall, and we'll be touring the portrait area. It's the gallery of portraits of all the mayors past in St. Louis, and one of the mayors will find you.
This is the Lemp Mausoleum, and the Lemp family, as you know, has a very haunted history in the St. Louis, city of St. Louis. The Lemp Mansion is known to be one of the 10 most haunted places in America, and they had 4 suicides. They had a very scandalous divorce when divorce was just unheard of. And they had just a lot of sorrow in their family. They had, in their mansion, they had like 30 rooms. They had 3 vaults just to handle all of their wealth. But it was amidst all that all their problems began. They actually built this mausoleum for Frederick. He was the youngest of their children, and he died very young. At 28 years old in 1901, and he was supposed to be the heir apparent to the Lemp Brewery, and they had been very successful. They were the first ones to send their product over rail to the West Coast, and so when he died, everybody just grieved very heavily for it, and so they built this mausoleum for him at a cost, believe it or not, of $60,000. So all the 4 members of the family that did commit suicide are buried here, and several other members of the family as well. But William, who had taken over the brewery from his father, actually shot himself after he lost Frederick, and also his best friend, Frederick Pabst, who was of the Pabst Blue Ribbon. But it's a very interesting mausoleum to look in.
We had a guest on our tour who said she stayed in the Lemp mansion, and she and her friends were kind of spoofing. They had heard that it was haunted, but they didn't really believe it. And there was another group of ladies across the hall, and they were the same way. And they were kind of out in the hall, and they were chatting among themselves, and they'd had a couple of drinks, and the lady across the hall says, oh, this is just silly. She says, I don't believe in this stuff, do you? And all of a sudden, the baby carriage that was in the hall started rolling towards her, and she screamed, and she left and did not come back the rest of the night.
Now we're going to be heading across the street to the Wainwright Monument, and this was designed by Louis Sullivan, and this was a monument to Wainwright's wife. He built it just in honor of her.
This mausoleum is the only mausoleum that is on the National Historic Register here in the cemetery. Obviously, it's a very fabulous mausoleum. We're told that it was built just for his wife, and it's not built for viewing in. It's just made to honor her.
You'll notice the friezes are like those on the buildings that are built downtown, especially the Wainwright building that is downtown. These are very, very similar friezes.
And of course, Wainwright was the one who designed the first skyscraper, and it was the first skyscraper because it was made out of concrete and steel, unlike any other building that had been built before.
This is the monument to David Francis, and you'll notice that this is a copper statue. She's weathered in all of the different temperatures and moisture, and so it's kind of got that blackish cast to it. And because of the hooded look to her veil, it makes her look very spooky sometimes. When we've had a lot of our tours come out here, people will take pictures, and they will see a lot of orbs around this monument. David Francis was quite a notable figure in the St. Louis's history. He was mayor in 1855. He was also governor of the state of Missouri from 1896 to 97. He also was an ambassador to Russia under Wilson's administration. But he was also very well known for his contribution to the World's Fair in 1904. He kind of chaired it and really helped to organize it. And so it's just, this is a very beautiful monument to him.
This monument was put here by Mrs. Hills for her husband when he passed away. It was sometime around 1890. And the amazing thing about it is you can tell it is just the tallest, biggest monument in the cemetery. And this was brought in by horse cart because they didn't have automobiles or trucks at that time. So if you can imagine, this huge stone was delivered all the way up the hill by horse cart and placed right here. This mausoleum is one of the grandest mausoleums in the cemetery, and it was built by Lily Bush for her husband and herself. Originally there was another mausoleum that stood here that held the Bush family members, but when Adolphus died, Lily wanted this monument to be only for herself and Adolphus. So the other family members were moved outside, out back, and they have only their first name on a small stone. Anna Bush, who from the Feasting Fox hung herself, is buried out back. This monument was built to last for 1,000 years. And as you can see, it probably will last that. It looks like it's brand new right now, even though Adolphus died in 1913. Bush was born in Germany. He came to St. Louis really with not any money at all, and he came to St. Louis, and he was a successful business person, and he hired on as a salesman at the Eberhard Anheuser brewery. Mr. Anheuser was so taken by Adolphus Bush that he kind of trained him, tutored him to be a business partner. And Adolphus married Lily, who was Eberhard's daughter, and he worked his way up by very hard work. And of course, the brewery, he bought his way into the partnership, and it became known as Anheuser-Busch. This monument is for Mr. Ludes and his voluptuous model. Mr. Ludes was a pharmacist, and he went to Europe and he met a sculptor, and the sculptor, of course, had a voluptuous model that Mr. Ludes fell in love with. And he asked her to marry him, and she declined. And when he came back to St. Louis, he ordered the statue to be made, and it was delivered to his home, and we're told that it weighs 12 tons. It stood in his house for a while, but it started making the front foyer fall in, so his children insisted that he move it out, and they decided to move it out here to the cemetery to his plot, and he is buried at her feet. Mr. Luty's wife was not buried here. She's buried in another part of the cemetery. She did not want to be buried by Mr. Luty's and his voluptuous model.
We've just entered the City Museum. This used to be the International Shoe Building. It was built in 1915, and actually the architect was Link, and he also was the architect for Union Station. The shoe company was in here for many years, and many of the things that you'll see around the City Museum are still from the shoe factory. You'll see they've done everything out of recycled materials. This room is the neatest thing, and you'll see the animals kind of molded into the floor, into the walls. Very neat. But it's also one of the most haunted buildings in the city. We found more interesting tales here than we did in just about any other place. And one of them happened right here. One of the security guards told us that he was down here one night at the witching hour, kind of around 1 to 2 a.m. And everyone had cleared out. It was the end of the day. And he saw a woman walking through here. And he kind of went up to her and he said, "You know, ma'am, you're not supposed to be here now. We've closed." And she kind of turned and looked at him, and she obliged him by walking through the wall, and she was gone. We're also going to see some things upstairs on the other floors, and we'll be heading up there now.
We're here at the train tunnel at the City Museum, and this spot is one of the haunted places of the City Museum. It's said to have a little girl that appears right here by the train tunnel. And the girls and the children that see her say that she has a blue pinafore dress. She has blonde hair that's tucked inside a hat. And sometimes the children will see her. Sometimes Rob, the train director, will see her. But they all see her here at the tunnel. As the kids go through, they'll scream because they think that Rob's going to run over the little girl. And of course, they go straight through her. But she's such a human ghost that they really think she's a person, not just a ghost. When we did our first tours, we had a group of people on our tours, and one of the girls said, "I remember seeing that little girl when I was a child. I thought she was real." And of course, at the time when the International Shoe Company was working, they did have children and women mostly working here in the shoe factory. As you can see, this old weathered cross looks rather creepy. It's the cross that came from the original Alexian Brothers Hospital. That's where the little boy who was exorcised was actually staying when the last part of the exorcism took place. It was in the 1940s, and the story The Exorcist was made from that real account of the little boy, but of course in the Exorcist film it was changed to a little girl. We've been told from the security people at night that in the wee hours underneath this cross there will appear a mist, and it will be very cold.
Well, we're here at City Hall, and this is a most beautiful old building that was actually finished just in time for the 1904 World's Fair. And you'll see this beautiful rotunda, and it was
quite an interesting place. They tell us at night they will hear footsteps in the hallways. They'll hear whispering, like conversations taking place. The most interesting thing is that they told us was that there is a hall of portraits on the second floor. It really kind of freaked out the security guard that told us about it. He said that there's one picture that is so creepy because the eyes follow you. And he said for us to pick out what painting it was. So we did. We went up there, and it was the painting of Peter Camden. It is quite creepy, and the eyes do follow you. He was the mayor of the city between 1846 and 1847. This was during the Dred Scott trials, when Dred Scott filed for his freedom, the first black man to file for his freedom.
We are very proud to announce our first book that was just released this year. We decided to write about something that no one else has written about, and we named our book Herman's Haunts, The Wines and Spirits of Herman, Missouri. We think it's very interesting. We tell you some of the history, we tell you some of the hauntings, and it's just a very fun book, and we hope that you buy it and enjoy it too.
It's a guide to the beds and breakfasts of Herman, as well as the wineries, and we'll tell you all about it, as well as the history and the haunted tales of Herman, Missouri.
We'd like to thank everyone for joining us on our very special Ghost Ride tour. We've enjoyed having you. We hope that you enjoyed coming with us. To all of the very special places, we like to say thank you to the people who were so gracious to us. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot.
For any of our other tours, we have a cemetery tour of Bell Fountain and Calvary Cemetery on Sunday afternoons. We have our exorcist tour. We have our general tour, and we also have our walking tour downtown. So we'd love to have you join us for any or all of these tours.
And of course, the last weekend in October, we have our very special dinner tour. We start dinner banquet here at the Feasting Fox, and we do our general tour in the city.
You can reach us by calling 618-451-2381 or 314-845-0522. You can also find us on the web at www.ghostridetours.com. We'll be happy to get you going on one of our tours.
We have to have it up like that, or it won't get no audio. But then if you turn down the room volume, you won't get no feedback.